Alright, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I like to give all the honor, the praise, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Rachakwadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles, the great millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the elect scattered abroad. That's the brother Barbers out here with a lesson, and Lord willing, it's edifying. Alright, and this lesson will be entitled, This Thing is Only About the Elect. Right, going into the elect remnant of the nation of Israel that's going to be saved. All right, because the Lord, he's preordained, an elect remnant, right, going into the 1/3 Israelite believers in the land of Babylon that will receive salvation. All right, so this is the book of Isaiah 1:9. It says, except the Lord of hosts had left unto us a very small remnant, we should have been as Sodom, and we should have been like unto Gomorrah. All right. So if it wasn't for the elect, right, the few, believers in this thing, right, because, you constantly had, the majority of Israelites going off, right, until it was the point where we all went off. All right. But what the, what's pretty much being said in this scripture is that if the Lord hadn't left unto us that elect, right, we should have been as Sodom and we should have been as Gomorrah, meaning we would have been destroyed. You see? But, through the elect, through that remnant that's going to be saved, we understand that righteousness will come forth because they will be, saved into the chariots, being the first ones to be changed, right? And then when the kingdom of heaven is established, the 2/3 remnant will come out of the loins of those elect, and they'll come out perfect, right? However, the Lord is only dealing with the elect at this period of time. So let's get Zechariah 13:8. It says, and it shall come to pass that in all the land, right, going into Babylon, said the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the 3rd shall be left therein. Now, this is talking about only the nation of Israel, right? When you read the scriptures, the only nation that the Lord has dealt with, that received the covenants, the laws, right, that had that relationship with the Most High was the nation of Israel. All right. So the 2 parts therein that shall be cut off and die are 2/3 unbelievers of the nation of Israel, right? Those that have a lack of knowledge, those that don't acknowledge the Lord, right, his name, who the Lord came back and died for, right, being the elect nation of Israel. All right, those who says that it's not saying that the MOTB is the C-hip, right? Those that ultimately wasn't open to the secrets of the scriptures, of this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. We're going to get that. All right, and it says, but the 3rd shall be left therein. So it's going to be, remnant, 1/3 elect remnant, right, believers, right, that's going to be saved, preserved, put in those chariots, all right, before the oncoming destruction. All right, and I will bring the 3rd part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. So it's going to be believers that's going to be put in those trials and tribulations and tests, right? But ultimately, they will endure until the end. All right. So you're going to be tried, right? Those that's put in their bodies as a living sacrifice, right? Not sugarcoating the truth, bringing out the 100% truth, right? That's talking about them. All right. It says, they shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say it is my people, and they shall say the Lord is my power. And that name that we know is Yahweh Bahashem Yahushua. Yahweh being the Most High's name, right? Meaning he exists. Bahashem meaning in the name. And then you have Yahushua, right? Who they ignorantly call Jesus Christ, the Messiah, which the name of Yahushua means he saves or he delivers. All right. So I'm going to get the next precept. It says, this is Matthew 24:22. It says, and except those days shall be shortened, there shall no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. So this is going into, if the Lord, doesn't come in, doesn't step in, right, or the days isn't, being shortened for the elect's sake, everybody is going to perish, right? But the scriptures say what? But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened, because this thing is all about the elect of the nation of Israel. All right. That's why, when we come in this truth, you have that overzealous spirit, you're trying to get everybody to come in, and, people ain't getting it, right? You got to constantly tell them, hey, you're going off, don't eat this, don't eat the pork, right? Don't do this, don't do that. And, they constantly just, doing their own thing, not really taking heed. You breaking down the scriptures to them, and it's not, it's not getting to them. And that's because, their ears are closed, right? The Lord has blinded them purposely. And as you grow in this thing, you start to realize that, if it's the Lord's will, they're going to get it. Because at the end of the day, no matter, whether you tell somebody he's an Israelite, whether they, walk across and see you on the highways and hedges, maybe come across a video, whatever, it's going to be no excuse. You don't have to sit down everybody, every Jake that and tell them, no, because the Lord ultimately, us doing our job, going out to the highways and hedges, preaching, putting forth the shows, making our bodies as a living sacrifice out there, eventually they gonna see it, and if the Spirit is working with them, they'll take heed to the message, whether it's they see it on YouTube, click on the video, stop, listen, to the gospel being preached, right? Or however else, a brother may have come across the truth, but, if they, don't take heed to the message, that just means that they're not part of the elect. And I want to get this word for the elect too. In Matthew 24 and 22, it say, Salakia, let me get that. It says, of course, they're going to say electos, right? Electos, which it says in the Greek, electos, picked out, chosen by the Most High to obtain salvation through Hamashiach. Christians are called chosen or elect of Yahweh, which, the Israelites are the true Christians, right? Not going into the anti-Christian church. The Messiah is called elect as appointed by the Most High to the exalted office conceivable, choice, select, the best of his kind or class, excellence preeminent, applied to certain individual Christians going into the Israelites, elect Israelites that's chosen. All right. It says implication, favorite, chosen, elect, and that's how the Lord made it to be. The Lord preordained it to be this way. All right. Those that's going to take heed to the message and those that's not. Because at the end of the day, Israel, in general are rebellious people, stiff-necked people, don't know who their power is, choose to, go away from the truth. So the Lord, and that's who the Lord appointed for that destruction. That's why every day you got to be glad and pray that the Lord keeps the spirit within you, because, you were chosen to wake up from that darkness, right, and into the light, which is this truth. All right. And you notice that when people fall away, those that maybe have considered brothers for a certain period of time, when they go back into the world, they turn out worse than they was before they woke up. So let's get next precept. This is Matthew 13 and 14, or 13. Therefore I speak to them in parables because they see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. All right. So Yahweh Shah knew that, if it wasn't for them to get it, they wasn't gonna get it. No matter how you try to, break it down to somebody, tell them a certain parable or break down the scriptures, going back to the Hebrew, the Greek, precept upon precept, if they don't get it, they don't get it. And Yahweh Shah understood that. All right, verse 14, it says, and in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, by hearing ye shall hear and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see and shall not perceive. And we out there, right? Bringing out have the Bibles out, right? 12 tribe sign, right? The other signs going into the sea hip, the name of the Lord. The sign with Cesare Borgia saying that that's not the Lord, right? That the Lord's true name is Yahweh Shai, and they're seeing it, they're listening to the message, but they still not getting it. They'll still cling on to Islam, or they'll cling on to anti-Christianity or Roman Catholicism, right? Because at the end of the day, this thing is only for the elect. It's not for them to get that. All right. And it may be those, you may have certain family members that, you have a, better relationship with, because, coming into this truth is a lot of division. But even amongst that, you may have certain family member that, hey, maybe you want them to get it, but it's not up, it ain't up to you. That's all for the Lord. When people start, getting judged, all right, we understand that that's going to be the Lord's will as well, So verse 15, it says, for this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. You see? So that's up to the Lord for them, whether they get it. Our only job is to present the message, be the messengers, right? Blow the trumpet, and it's ultimately, the Lord's will if they get it or not, because if you constantly trying to, oh, come on, man, why you ain't getting it? Bashing them over the head with the scriptures, right? Constantly rebuking somebody, and, they're not changing, then, hey, that's just the Lord's will. And we're not to go against the Lord's will, right? The scripture's going to that nobody can resist the will of the Lord, right? So if it's not for them, it's not for them. You see? Even somebody that, may come into the truth, and, you're not seeing no, real progression, they're dragging their feet, going through the motions, fall back into the world, or, kind of slothful, right? Then, that's another sign that they're not of the elect. And soon, hey, they're going to be off to, do their own thing. This is the book of Amos 3:7. Surely the Lord Most High, Yahweh, will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants the prophets, the mysteries of the scriptures, right? Knowing what the mark of the beast is, right? Being able to break it down, right? The Quran, or going into the Greek, going into the Hebrew, have the Lord's names, able to link America with Babylon the Great. You see? Those that understand that, the Lord is only dealing with the nation of Israel, really the elect of the nation of Israel on this side. Not putting worldly things into the truth, rap music into the truth, right? Keeping the keeping it holy, not being in constant debates, making merchandise out of the truth, right? So we gonna know these secrets, and we gonna understand the will of the Lord, because you got a lot of guys who, may be pretty knowledgeable about the scriptures, right? But they really don't have the spirit on them. That's why you see a lot of these guys is waxing worse and worse. These different Israelite camps, things like that, because they don't truly have, the Lord's secrets, And you got to have the 100% truth. It's not about having 90%, 95%, If you don't have the 100% truth, then, you're not a part of the elect. The Lord ain't dealing with you at all. You're not going into the prophecies, like that. All right. Then the Lord ain't dealing with you. But that'll do it with the lesson. All right, and Lord willing, it was edifying. So with that, I'd like to give all the honor and praise and glory unto Yahweh by Hashem, Yahushua by Hashem, Ruach HaKodesh. Shalom.